John McMullen. You can hear him daily here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, providing the best Eagles and NFL coverage in the area at JF McMullen on Twitter. We've got an interesting story brewing here, John, as the Eagles' newly acquired Michael Bennett has been indicted by the grand jury, indicted for injury of an elderly person, I believe a paraplegic woman, as he tried to get on the field at the Super Bowl to celebrate with his brother. This is a very odd story that is brewing right now.
Yeah, it really is. And the Houston police had a press conference, so I'm not quite sure what went on with that at 3:45, because we were talking with Mike Wallace, the new Eagles receiver. But the indictment is basically, as you mentioned, he's accused of injuring a 66-year-old wheelchair-bound woman who was working security at the Super Bowl, pushed her over to try to get on the field. 14 months ago, if you ask me why did it take this long, we're looking for comments from the district attorney down there. And the Eagles are going to issue some kind of statement later this afternoon. So much of it's in a holding pattern, but the reality is there's a warrant out for Michael's arrest, and they're negotiating for his surrender. So it's relatively serious, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting tweets from people wanting to know if the Eagles are going to release him or should they release him. I mean, is this something that could get to that point, or is this just one of those, a la Nigel Bradham where he's got a gun and we're hearing about it and then it just kind of goes away?
Well, I think it's way early to speculate about potential release because there are so many questions with the alleged incident and the fact that perhaps he did push through a security line. That's the accusation. Certainly, if that was the case, you would think there was no premeditation, no malice. There's questions people are going to bring up because of the 14 months in between the charges. Are people in Houston doing this for political reasons because it's an athlete, a high-profile person? You have to ask those kinds of questions on top of it. So for the people immediately saying the Eagles should release Michael Bennett, that's not going to happen. They have to gather information. Neither the Seahawks or the Eagles were aware of this incident or the potential that there could be charges. So clearly he didn't tell anyone. I don't know if that's because he didn't think it was that big of a deal or because he was just sort of trying to leave it alone, hoping it would go away. There's so many questions that need to be answered as far as this incident goes. So when you talk about trying to set a standard or just automatically releasing him, that's not fair. Potentially down the road, if things point in a negative direction, if it is more serious than it seems on paper, then you have to talk about things like that. But that's very, very premature.
By the way, the Eagles have put out an official statement on this. We are aware of the situation involving Michael Bennett and are in the process of gathering more information. Because this is an ongoing legal matter, we will have no further comment at this time.
Boilerplate is what we call that, and that's what we expected. Talking to people here behind the scenes, nobody knew about it. So again, it's tough to give concrete answers when you don't have all the facts. And all we have now is allegations and an indictment that seem to be a little bit of an overkill. But while I say that, I have no idea how injured the woman was. And obviously, if you're an NFL football player and you're pushing over a 66-year-old wheelchair-bound woman, well, that can turn bad very, very quickly. But we just don't have any of those answers really yet.
John, are you surprised by that? I mean, neither team was aware of that. The Eagles you could understand, but the fact that the Seahawks knew nothing about this before it all started breaking today, in this day of social media and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those things, plus how heavily NFL security monitors their players these days, isn't it a little surprising that nobody knew this was cooking up?
Well, and that's a good point, and that's one that I brought up. You would think at the Super Bowl there would have to be video of this incident because of the security at that event, because of all the precautions they take. But if you're the Seattle Seahawks, you're not looking and culling through NFL security videotape and looking for something of this nature. And if they're not made aware of it, if there is no accusation, if Michael Bennett doesn't say, look, I might be in some trouble because something happened, well, how could they possibly know? It wasn't on the Seahawks' dime, so to speak. It wasn't a Seahawks-related event. He was only there to watch his brother. That was Super Bowl 51. That was the Patriots and Falcons. So, no, I'm really not surprised at all that the Seahawks had no idea. And certainly from the Eagles' standpoint, they would have no idea.
10 years in prison and a potential $10,000 fine. I mean, this isn't like a simple assault. I mean, this is a felonious charge.
That's assault, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a felony charge. And anytime you see those kinds of numbers, you start thinking, well, this is really serious. And anytime it's any felony, it's really serious. But you would think somebody who doesn't have a history. Now, he had that incident in Las Vegas, but that was more of an accusation at the Las Vegas police. He was never – that's not really a criminal charge. So you don't have a guy with a history of arrest. I would find it almost incomprehensible that he would serve jail time over something like this. But again, but John, don't have all the answers.
This is just one of those things for the detractor. I mean, when the Eagles made this move, there was a lot of people out there that said, he's a bad human being and he's a bad guy, which, isn't really the case. But it throws fuel to that fire, right? That they brought in a bad guy to a good locker room. Why would they shake up the apple cart? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and certain people are going to, you're right, they're going to jump on that, and they're going to immediately say, see, and they don't have any information either. They're just trying to validate their preconceived judgments of somebody who they don't know. I can tell you from talking to Michael, he seems like a nice guy. He certainly doesn't come across as somebody who's going to be a bad locker room influence at all. In fact, the exact opposite. He seems like a leader. He seems like someone who's very engaging from his personality standpoint, and he seems willing to help the younger players. I mean, that's what you ask for from a football perspective if you're an NFL coach. That's the kind of guy you want. We also heard, not from a legal standpoint, but we also heard a lot of the whispers about Jay Ajayi being a bad locker room guy when the Eagles traded for him from Miami. Turned out he was just fine. There were no real incidents. He wasn't complaining. He wasn't creating problems. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to use this, as I said, to just rubber stamp what you think Michael Bennett is because of kneeling during the national anthem or what happened in Las Vegas, it's easy to do. But the reality is, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, if you're the NFL, you have to investigate and you have to see what really went on here.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. He's got more on it, plus the Eagles' statement is out on Michael Bennett. We don't have all the information. If we get more, of course, we will give it to you. The Eagles did make a move yesterday, right as we got off the air. 6:06 last night. The Eagles bring in Mike Wallace, I should say, not Michael Bennett, Mike Wallace, who wasn't he a cop in the movie? What was that movie that he was? Mike Wallace. What movie was that?
Mike Wallace was on 60 Minutes. That's the Mike Wallace I think of. I'm going right to the guy knocking on the door.
Am I getting the guy's name wrong in the movie? Probably. Somebody out there will text him. But,
you in movies, I wouldn't go there.
Yeah, I'm probably wrong. But Mike Wallace comes over, essentially is filling in the role for Torrey Smith. Mike Lowry, by the way, I think is the movie I'm thinking of. Mike Lowry. What movie is that? Something Gun. I don't remember. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
Yeah, from a football perspective, I mean, this is another one where it certainly looks like a very good move. Mike Wallace is just a better player than Torrey Smith, and you get him for half the price. So from that standpoint, it's pretty astonishing. But if you think about it even further than that, the Eagles traded a player they didn't want to Carolina, and that's Torrey Smith. They got back a cornerback on his rookie deal, making virtually nothing, very cost-effective, $500 and something thousand. Then they were able to use that money they got from trading Torrey to sign Mike Wallace, as I said, at half price. So essentially what they did is they got Darryl Worley and Mike Wallace for Torrey Smith, and depending on the incentives Mike got and how the NFL views them, whether they're likely to gain incentives, depending on how much his incentives count against the salary cap, they gain anywhere from $500,000 to about $2 million for Torrey Smith. There's no way to frame this other than bravo to Howie Roseman and Joe Douglas, because this guy's not this guy's not Antonio Brown. He's not what he was when he was in Pittsburgh. But compared to Torrey Smith, this is a significant upgrade for this offense.
John, do you have an idea of why his numbers slipped last year? Mike and I were talking about that, whether it was Flacco's injury, was it an offensive line situation? Because he did have over 1,000 yards his first year in Baltimore, but then his second year in Baltimore, he slipped off a little bit.
No, I think it was a bad offense, and Mike kind of said that today. He had the 30th ranked offense or something of that nature in Baltimore, so there's going to be change. It was just a bad offense. It was all of the above. They struggled. Obviously, Joe Flacco really has never been the same since he tore his ACL. Their running game wasn't very good until later in the season. They struggled on the offensive line. And Mike isn't a number one receiver any longer. I don't know if he ever was. He was paid like it in Miami when he got the free agency the first time. And he's had 3 1,000-yard seasons over his career. But what he is a home run hitter, and that's what the Eagles need. They need a guy who can stretch the field. He's inconsistent at times catching the football. Doesn't have the best hands in the world, but they're better than Torrey Smith. So if you look at what he's going to be asked to do on this team, and that's stretch the field so Alshon Jeffrey and Zach Ertz and Nelson Aguilar can do all the heavy lifting underneath, it's a perfect fit.
By the way, the movie was Bad Boys with, and the guy's name was Mike Lowry.
Right, the original one. That was Will Smith, Martin Lawrence, Tia Leone. All right, John, so Mike Wallace is who we're talking about here, and stretching the field, popping the top off, but how much of a factor, too? Look, the Eagles won the Super Bowl. That's going to attract free agent talent as well. But how much, we talked about Flacco, how much was who's going to be throwing him the football? Was that a draw?
Well, I was the one who asked Mike that question, and he joked that it was 99% of the reason he chose the Eagles. And the other 1% was the rest of the team. I mean, he realizes, and most people realize, Carson Wentz is an MVP level quarterback, and if you're a receiver, I mean, you want to play with a guy like that, and that's a big advantage the Eagles have. I mean, one of the advantages for recruiting is having the great quarterback, and the other is winning a Super Bowl. The Eagles happen to have them both, so that's why a guy like Mike Wallace will take less money, and he flat out said he had offers for more money. He also told me that, he made a ton of money in free agency the first time with Miami. He made a good sum the second time when he was cut by the Vikings and Baltimore signed him. And he said it's not about money for him anymore. He's got all the money he needs. His mom is fine. His girl is fine. Now it's about him, and he wants a ring. So he's coming here to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that was the turn of phrase I was looking to hear you say, that he said it's not about that bag of cash, right? It's about the ring.
Yeah, it's not about the bag. That's what he said. He went, and he admitted, as a young player, he went for the bag. The bag is money. And by the way, that's what he should do. That's what you have to do in this league. It's sort of the Eagles learned that the opposite way with a guy like Trey Burton, who came up as an undrafted free agent. So he didn't make a lot of money by NFL standards, obviously. For regular person standards, he did. But he had the opportunity to get the free agency. He has 3 young children under 5. Yeah, he would have loved to stay here. Carson Wentz is one of his best friends in the world. But the reality is you have to take care of your family. And if you're a young player, that's what you should be doing. And in Trey's case, he already has a Super Bowl ring. So his decision was easy. In Mike's case, in a veteran, he's going to be 32 in August. It's the opposite. He's got the money. Now he wants the ring.
John, I mean, not to say it's an indictment or anything, but this just indicate that they didn't believe that Mac Hollins was ready for a bigger role?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was prudent. I don't think he's ready for that role to be a starting receiver in this league. He was very raw coming out of North Carolina. He didn't play a lot, wasn't asked to run a lot of different routes. So it was always going to be a stretch to say that he would sort of hit the ground running and be that kind of number 2 receiver right off the bat. But when you say that, you can't have an all-pro at every position. And the Eagles know that, but it's nice to be able to bring in a veteran security blanket, so to speak, for $2.5 million. And you know what? If Mac Hollins has a great offseason, has a great camp, and outplays him, then he can earn the job. But what you don't want to do with a young player is just give him the job.
Hey, John, you know, the team won the Super Bowl last year. Do you think this team is a better football team than they were at the on Super Sunday?
Well, I think they're heading in that direction. They still have some work to do. They lost 2 tight ends, so they need a replacement for Brett Selleck, Trey Burton. They need certainly a blocking tight end for this offense. They probably need another running back. They could use at least a young sort of person to groom on the offensive line. So there's still things they need to do. But if you look at certain individual moves, you look at Michael Bennett. Now, it's a question mark now because of what's going on in Harris County, but on the football field, he's better than Vinny Curry, the player he's replacing. Haloti Ngata is 34 years old, but it's short term, but he's a better player than the guy he's replacing, Bo Allen. Mike Wallace, he's 32 years old. He's going to be 32 once training camp is here, but he's significantly better than Torrey Smith. So on certain positions, you could say early in the process, they're shaping up, at least on paper, to be a better team.
Which, entering last year, I don't think anybody thought the Eagles were a Super Bowl team. I think we thought they were taking steps in the right direction. But now, going into the season, according to Vegas, they have the second best odds to win that championship, which means you've got to make improvements here. And so far, they've made some, interesting improvements. Now, 2 stories that have come out today and yesterday. One, Michael Kendricks got a little ankle surgery there, 1. And 2, report that Malcolm Jenkins had to go underwent surgery to repair ligaments in his left thumb. Neither guy should be in any danger. But the Kendricks one's interesting because you wonder if the Eagles would – we always talk about trying to trade Michael Kendricks. Would they think about that this particular offseason, or did they find him to be too valuable this time around to think about moving?
No, I think they're thinking about moving him, and actually they probably want to move him. The reality is, as a third linebacker, his cap number is over $7 million. And remember, he doesn't play a lot on special teams. And really, we saw when Jordan Hicks was healthy, the third linebacker in the Eagles defense is only playing 25 to 30% of the time. So when you're allocating assets under the salary cap, that's just too much for a third linebacker. And they also signed Corey Nelson to sort of fill in that role, who can play on special teams. He would be much more cost effective. So I do think they want to trade Michael Kendrick. But the issue is, same as last year, they don't want to give him away because they think he's a very, very good football player. And last year it worked out for him because Jordan was injured and tore his Achilles, and Michael stepped in and was a three-down linebacker and played very well, by the way. So it wasn't as difficult to sort of swallow that medicine and the big cap number because he was playing. When he's not playing, it's really, really difficult to swallow that number.
And John, Kendrick's having that surgery in Green Bay, and you write that he's not the only Eagle player out there seeing this ankle specialist.
Yeah, Brandon Graham went out there. Our friend Jeff Mosher got that as well. Remember, Brandon hurt his ankle late in the season on Christmas Day, missed the end of the regular season, came back, and he was clearly hurt in the playoffs, but Brandon's Brandon. He still kept going, still played with the same kind of energy he always does, and he made the big play in the Super Bowl that clinched the first Lombardi Trophy for the Eagles. So Dr. Robert Anderson is out in Green Bay now. He used to be in Charlotte. He is the guy when it comes to foot and ankle injuries in the NFL. So both Michael and Brandon were out there this week with him, and that's no surprise. But all of these, including Malcolm, I mean, that's what happens in every city in the NFL. You have all these maintenance surgeries because guys get banged up. This is a very difficult sport to play, and both Kendricks and Jenkins surgeries were both described as maintenance-type surgeries.
More on the Eagles at our website, 973ESPN.com. John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen for all of the Eagles and NFL news, and listen to him every day right here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, pal. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too, guys. Thanks.